Yes. Somebody say sales, please. What we do. We were founded in 1994. With this, the Wireless Communication Alliance is a non-profit business league dedicated to collaboration in the wireless industry. It started with Silicon Valley, but thanks to Zoom and also, unfortunately, thanks to the pandemic, we are now worldwide. We are reaching clients and members in Singapore, Japan, China, all over the world, Europe, of course. And our mission is, with this, networking people. Thanks to our sponsors, only with the sponsorship, we are still alive. And if this would go away, we would not be here anymore because we don't have the typical membership fee. We rely on our sponsors like Aspel, Google, CIG, ETI, IoT Nation, Woodside Capital, Vola, of course, SensorWorks, Sensitel, Energis, and more in smaller range. If you decide to be also become a sponsor, please let me know and shoot me an email or a phone call. Upcoming events, more exciting events coming up. Every month we have at least one. We try to have two now. As of September, we try it. Wireless connectivity for smart everything will be on August 18. It's on our website. All the events are already on our website. So we are not limited to smart cities or smart building, smart everything. Then we will have IoT gizmos and gadgets where companies present their news in the IoT world together with Oktoberfest in September. Then we have an open Wi-Fi event. Probably you heard about open Wi-Fi. That will be in October. Then our flagship event for the 22nd year, we have it now, What's Hot, Was Not, where people from the money area, so M&A or venture capitalists, will talk about what was good in 2021, what not that much, and what will be the future bringing to us. We will have a global wireless startup pitch event in December as a kind of end of the year event. We never did this before also. Mostly European startups companies will be invited. If you're a startup company, please send me an email and we probably can vote you in also. I focused a little bit on 2022. Our Spectrum 5G event will be here, I think, for the 5th time in the year. And we will have 6G event, terahertz event. We will have wireless power in 2022. It will be launched pretty soon on our website. A little bit housekeeping. Please use the Zoom chat section for questions. Presentation and recordings will be available within 48 hours on our website and also on YouTube. Again, greetings to the world and thanks for being our guest. A little advertisement for IoT Nation, a special partner of ours. If you go to iotnation.com, promo code WCA500, you will get a 30-day trial and see what's happened in the IoT world. And the best thing of the day, we will raffle off in about 80 minutes. You see me again. We will raffle off a rocket lamp. But you have to be present to get this. So with this, I hand over to our special guests here, John Weiss and Nick Brennan. John Weiss is the founder of the engineering school of the streets. He will introduce himself in a few seconds also. Nick Brennan is one of his lead engineers to make all this work. Nick and John, sorry. With this, I stop sharing here. And if you have presentation and so on, it's now your turn. John, any reason I cannot hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Peter. And good morning, everyone. And my screen should be sharing. Let's see, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, super. Well, I think I'm not sharing correctly. I'm so sorry. Give me one moment so I can share correctly. Window, there we go, share. Okay, now you should be seeing it. Are we good?
No,
it
was there.
It went away.
You're not seeing my screen now. Oh dear. Let me try that again. Share screen. Try that again. Window. Share.
There you go.
There you
Okay,
go.
great. Super. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience, everyone, as we're just getting started. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to ask everyone to think back to your childhood. Did you enjoy engineering as a hobby? Did an adult mentor you? Did that spark lifelong passion and opportunity? It did for me. My dad studied and did radio electronics with the US Navy during World War II. So I grew up with guidance and access to tools. The Boom nonprofit apprenticeship exists to give that same opportunity to disadvantaged teenagers from broken homes and broken communities. We plant seeds for mechanical and electrical engineering so that one day our graduates may build careers in hardware. Boom has won awards from Proto Labs and Not Impossible Labs. We're a member of Engineers Without Borders. We've been featured in Make Magazine and Electronic Engineering Journal, and we completed a residency at Autodesk. Our advisors include Walt McClay, president of Volar Systems, and Bruce Bishop, founder of TE Connectivity's Antenna Group. Our youth training is based on youth fabrication of handmade wireless loudspeakers. We're developing a very low-cost method to broadcast music between our boomboxes. We aim to compete with Bluetooth 5.0. Long-term, our method may provide off-grid wireless broadcasting for underserved rural areas and for emergency communication during disasters. We're inviting you engineers to join our wireless engineering effort. We're not asking you to work with teenagers. We need volunteer engineers to join our development team for either hands-on development or just advising. If you are expert in any of the following skills, please contact me at john@theboom.org. I also put my contact information in the chat. Our skill areas include Simple Link, board layout, LNAs, audio compression, I2S, application firmware, and antenna testing. Our team includes engineers from Apple, Autodesk, and please say hello to Nick Brennan, our wireless engineer from Keysight. I'm going to stop sharing, Nick, and you can go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, John. Hopefully, audio's coming through okay. Good. So my name is Nick Brennan. I am a systems design engineer and hardware engineer here at Keysight, working primarily with 5G and 6G test solutions. And I was introduced to John and the Boom project through a colleague of mine that basically reached out and said that he was looking for some help and that he had a really cool program. So I looked into it myself, and I was really impressed with what I found. I very much had the sort of spark of engineering kindled in me by adult mentors early in my childhood. My dad was actually also an electronics technician with the Air Force, and so it was that early exposure to sort of like a mentor who could kind of pull that out and focus me into the engineering side. So the opportunity to be able to use my skills and abilities to sort of bring that back to a community, particularly underserved communities, really appealed to me and really does appeal to me. So when I think when I first reached out to John, I wasn't quite sure what I would be getting into, but I was really impressed with what I found. John has done a really amazing job of laying the groundwork, the foundations for what looks like a pretty impressive wireless system design. So, and I've been really excited to help him out with the sort of the finer details of getting us from a system design concept into the early like breadboarding phases. So, and we are at the point where working on the wireless transceiver side, we've done initial chipset selection. And I've actually started doing some bench testing of our first evaluation boards of our chipset. So I'm looking forward to seeing if we can get some additional help, because it's a really cool project for a really cool purpose.
Great. Thank you so much, John and Nick. We at the WCA, we promoted you guys already with our sponsors, Aspil and also ETI. They're looking into it and hopefully they come back. I will follow up with them. Let me share my screen again. No. Go on. Okay, here we are. So again, John and Nick, thank you so much. And like I said, it was really, really good if you guys have a little bit engineering background and would help Nick and John to look into the hardware layout so they can bring it to the children. Now let's really start with the broadband of for underserved rural areas. We have as moderator Mo Shakuri from NIST and also joint venture Silicon Valley, which is also our partner. We have Chris Frost from Crucio, which is a local IP service for broadband. We have Samantha Sharpman, I hope I pronounced it right, from Marconi Society. We have another Christopher Mitchell from Institute of Local Self-Reliance, and then we have, last but not least, Richard Bernard from Whisper. Mo, the show is yours. I stop sharing. I think you have a short slideshow,
Sure.
and then it's yours.
Oops, I continue. Is it sharing now?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon. As Peter said, this is Mo Shakuri. It's a great honor to be the moderator. My job is as a moderator is to get no questions, so I'm a lucky one. So what I thought to do is take a few minutes before we set the stage to give you a quick update about the work that we are doing in NIST. And we had a very interesting workshop last week in Indiana, Purdue. So give a little bit perspective that I think hopefully get the juices going to ask questions. I'm just told Chris Frost is getting tough question. The other good Chris gets easy questions. So just please plan that. I'm not sure what happened. The infrastructure guy, Chris, is always gets it hard. So from that perspective, just in the perspective of my work is I'm the co-chair of NIST. NIST, as you know, National Institute of Standards and Technology, has a group that is focusing on economic development in different areas. Our focus has been in agriculture and rural. Now, we started this about 3 years ago before rural was hot. Most of you know rural and tribe right now is extremely hot because there's a lot of money coming. So we are hoping out of trillions of dollars, some money can come to some innovation in this space. I think it's very interesting dynamics from that level. So the main focus that NIST does is really looking at it from a perspective of the end user. It's not a technology organization. We are looking at it from a farm, a small town community, and trying to look at how do we develop public-private partnership in order to make the need. And I think that when you look at the detail of that, as you know, there has been over the last 20 years, billions has been spent and many claims of rural development, but has never happened on the ground that much. But in that case, what the purpose of the NIST group was how do we get with federal stakeholders like USDA, NTIA, NSF, and then also work with the other organizations like cities, communities, tribes, and also technology companies to make an impact on the ground. So in the website, we have details about some white papers and technology that could be very interesting to look at that. Oops. So did it go? Okay. So now first question, and when we were discussing that, for most of you, when we talk about broadband, this is one of those holy wars that is going on about the definition of broadband. I'm sure our panel is fantastic to be able to give you a perspective. FCC has put the rule called 25 megabit down, 3 megabit up. First of all, as you know, this number doesn't mean anything to actual work in that level. And what is really interesting is there's a lot of discussion regarding, do I change the definition of broadband? So having that perspective, and also broadband used to be a video chat, Netflix and video, now is more about application, so it's upstream. So when you go ask and look at the definition of the broadband, there is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of dynamic. And one of the questions, of course, we go into our panel is to give you a definition of broadband, and you can select the best answer and give them a price. But this is a very big issue, because when you don't have a measure, how do you build success if you have a moving direction like that? Another area that is really important is when you go look at the broadband. This was interesting when the statistic that was done in the event. There are 60,000 farms today who have only dial-up. I don't know how many of you have used dial-up, is before our generation, but today, significant portion of rural community, dial-up is the best they can get. In addition to that, when you go look at the actual statistics of how many people are connected, of course, everybody knows now that the FCC metric is completely wrong. It doesn't measure the actual number. And there's a lot of debate going on from the perspective of as much as 50% don't have broadband to something like 90% have broadband. So it's a very interesting dynamics. And during the conference, I thought this presentation by Chris Ali of University of Virginia was very interesting. Because one of the areas to solve the problem, you need to know the problem statement, correct? And the problem statement is that we have a broadband connectivity. As you see, this is 6 counties in Virginia, and the FCC says between 92 to 100% have broadband. When you did Microsoft, you get between 23% to 76% who have broadband. When you do the technique, Lightbox is getting closer to 60 to 80%. When you go ask the county themselves, when they have surveyed the residents, that's a number, 5% to 100%. And you tell me, again, you guys are, a lot of us are engineering. When you don't have that problem statement and target defined very well, it's hard to design a cohesive strategy. So this was actually very interesting. One of the big gaps that exist is, what is the actual target? What are you trying to solve? The next one is when you look at it, there is a big misunderstanding between connectivity versus broadband. If you look at connectivity, the main purpose of connectivity is if you are in a farm or you are doing manufacturing or economic, there's a lot of sensors. And getting affordable connectivity of sensors that are low battery life, last long time, and be able to get the information is a critical element of what is needed. At the same time, broadband video camera solution is needed. What I put on the bottom was there is an official first US launch of an aerostat. Most of us know many different techniques. This was a very unique capability. We had a tour of it last week. This is a tower that can be as the height of, is a tethered tower, 1,500 feet. I'm sure Frost and the team knows if you have that 1,500 feet tall, we can go do a lot of things compared to fighting with 30 feet roof access. So in that case, they're doing an interesting activity that you're putting in one aerostat, has 60, 70 mile radius for all the IoT sensors. And then you can use it for a targeted broadband activity. So in a way, is a tool in the toolbox. And I think that some of the investment that is happening nationally hopefully enables, and this was developed by Wabash Heartland Innovation Network, is a 10 county in Indiana that doing innovation. So somehow the innovation in the rural is not happening in Silicon Valley, is moving to Midwest. So maybe we need to get lower cost homes and live there. So I think the last one I had was, I thought maybe it would be very interesting for you is, I apologize, it's a busy slide, but when we had the workshop, this was the topic that we spent 2 days on. So for those of you who are interested in the devils and the detail, I think we'll enjoy that. Things that were related were, what are the information regarding precision agriculture that is important. The second one, there was a lot of discussion about funding between NTIA, EDA, USDA, NSF, Treasury, and Tribal. Billions of dollars are coming in and starting now. So the expectation is to see how potentially some of these investment can change the game on the ground. Then another area that we are working within the NIST is, how do I do crowdsourcing of the data so we have more realistic maps? And that's something that I think could be very interesting, because having realistic map can help policymakers to put the right decision. In addition to that, anytime you want to change in the game is you want to come up with the innovation. We shared some innovation case studies in Oregon, California, Indiana, and Florida. And it's very interesting to look at how the different communities are using that one, and how do I get development of economy, workforce development, economic development. And when you look at that, you will find that the broadband is only 10%. What do I do with it, and how do I get jobs, growth? That's a much more critical. The final area that is interesting discussion that NIST is working on is the whole idea of trust and transparency. There is a lot of farmers or community, even ourselves, who are very worried about what is happening to our data. And how do I make sure this data can be trustable? First of all, when you're a farmer, you're making money once a year. The last thing you want to do is that checkbook disappears, correct? You don't have that option of bi-weekly checks. Or if I am a person who is educated, I want to make sure my information is private. So I think we're going to have a white paper on that. For those of you who are interested on that one, please send an email to me. I'll be happy to connect you with this initiative. So I hope that set the stage a little bit what NIST is doing. What I like to do is now turn it over. And maybe what we start to do is go through and ask each presenter what I try to not to butcher up their bio, since I cannot read very well. They can quickly introduce themselves, and I will go with the list that was given to me. So Richard, you're first in deck. If you can just introduce yourself, the kind of area you're focusing on. You know, Richard loves the spectrum, so all about the spectrum area. So Richard, take it away, please.
Thanks, Mo, and those very illustrious slides showing some of the real issues that are coming up right now on a national scale, even international scale. So I'm looking forward to coming back to some of those issues. My name is Richard Bernhardt. I'm the National Spectrum Advisor for the Wireless Internet Service Providers Association. It's an association representing about 1,000 WISPs, or fixed wireless operators, throughout the United States. I am also on the board of directors and serve as the operations working group director for the Wireless Innovation Forum. Wireless Innovation Forum developed the baseline standards for CBRS, which is a segment of the spectrum 3550 to 3700, which is one of the first shared spectrums that are out there following TV white space. I also serve on the upcoming 6 gigahertz band as the co-chair of the multi-stakeholder group, a group of about 200 companies, individuals, incumbents, and new users, Wi-Fi users and otherwise, who are looking to develop the unlicensed portion of 6 gigahertz. All of these entities are interested in the subject of rural and under and unserved areas of the United States. It's a critically important subject. And the chart that you showed, Mo, where there's a huge disagreement about what is covered in the way of broadband, is very accurate, perhaps even more starkly than it showed in those numbers. Without a doubt, we have a baseline of maybe 30 million people in the United States that don't have much above dial-up. And if you look at some numbers, that number climbs up to as high as 100 million in underserved. So it's critically important that we address this in the United States. It's a big line of debate in Congress and in the White House, and I'm very pleased to be here today to have that discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. I think that we're going to go next with Samantha Sharpman. Samantha, I think please go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Mo and Peter, for having me. My name is Samantha Sharpman. I'm the Executive Director of the Marconi Society, and we're a nonprofit focused on ensuring everyone in the world can enjoy the opportunities of the network. So we are a 47-year-old organization. And over that time, the Marconi Society has recognized innovators in information and communications technology through our prestigious Marconi Prize, which is widely considered the Nobel Prize of Communications. But we also actively engage in technology policy and digital inclusion communities and is convening programs designed to connect the unconnected. Before my role at the Marconi Society, I co-founded a digital inclusion research and evaluation organization called Connected Insights. I served as an incorporating board member of the research director of the CYC Institute, and also was the assistant director for Connect Your Community, which was a collaborative that conducted a $19 million federal stimulus grant project that connected over 33,000 residents in a 5-state region. So that's kind of my background. I'm here to talk about broadband in rural areas and the role of data and advocacy.
Thank you very much, Samantha. Going to Christopher Mitchell. You're the good Chris, correct?
Oh, definitely. Yes. You can just tell from my very trustworthy hair. I am the director of the Community Broadband Networks Initiative at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance has been around longer than I have. It was founded in 1974. It's focused on doing research and advocacy. We work with other allies across the country, and our focus is building an American economy that is driven by local priorities and is accountable to the local folks. We believe in local decision making, and when it comes to broadband, we've been working for about 15 years on solutions that are locally driven, that are focused on local priorities. We are probably most commonly associated with municipal broadband approaches, but we're also very supportive of a wider range of community approaches, including local companies. We're very focused on cooperatives in more rural area. I think cooperatives have shown a great leadership in investing in both fiber and wireless in areas that the big national companies have tended to ignore. But I think ultimately we try to be pragmatic. We certainly have an ideology that drives us, but we also want to recognize the facts on the ground. And I guess that I've tended to be more associated with fiber-centric approaches, but fundamentally I am interested in local decision making and what works locally. And so I think probably the solutions that we see that are the most hopeful tend to revolve around both wireless and fiber together for both short-term and long-term gains.
Thank you, Chris. And last but not least, I think the Chris Frost, he has the coolest last name, so that's the reason we put him last. So Chris, go ahead, please.
How's it going? Thank you, Mo, and thank you everyone for having me, and for showing up and listening to this argue, discuss, and chatter about the best ways to solve the world's problems. My name is Chris Frost. I just go by Frost because there's already too many Chris's, not only in the world, but on this call. I am Director of Infrastructure for Cruz.io Internet. We're an ISP in Santa Cruz, California. I'm also a current president of FISPA, the Fiber Internet Service Providers Association. And so my focus is largely infrastructure. I'm basically just an infrastructure nerd, whether it's wireless, fiber, sometimes copper. It's finding the right solution for the right problem. And Mo, you actually touched on it with your slides. One of the things that we like to talk about is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution across the board. And so I think, Christopher, you talked about it well, the idea of local solutions for local problems. It's the right way to approach it. This is a really large country. There are a lot of very different communities. There's a lot of very different problems to solve. There's some really great standards and practices that can be applied somewhat universally, but the nuts and bolts of solving the problems have to be worked out on the nuts and bolts of what the problem is. And so I think that, for me, that's the exciting part, is looking at the individual different issues and how do we come up with a general idea that we then fit the individual issues.
Thank you very much, Frost. I think I'll go ahead and start. I know that there is, as we said, no good answer, but one of the critical issue, as I started with my first slide, is what is broadband, correct? And what do we need to do? Because we want to build an infrastructure, which is, by the time you finish it, doesn't want to be obsoleted. At the same time, there is only a limited amount of money exists. From your experience, looking at the 25-3 rule that was developed and they're looking at changing it, what would be the panelist perspective about what should be the target that we should put for ourselves to solve the rural community?
Yeah, I'd love to take a first shot at that, because actually I would complicate it just a little bit to say, I feel like it's hard when we talk about these numbers to, it's easy to get a little bit confused, but I think there's one thing between like what areas qualify and a set of numbers that would say we should prioritize that don't have this level of service. And I think there's a different set of numbers as to what, if you're going to use public dollars, what level of technology should that be delivering? And I think those are different numbers. I think 25.3 is a reasonable cutoff for where we want to prioritize people who don't have at least that. Although, given that we have no set of numbers as to where those people actually are, it's incredibly difficult to do so. And I feel like I'll say that for the other set of numbers, 100 megabits down and 20 megabits up to me seems like the slowest I would be willing to go. I'm a little bit uneasy that in 2025, we might be using taxpayer dollars to build networks that are 100 megabits down and 20 megabits up. So I guess rather than going on much longer, that's just where I would start off the conversation myself.
I would 100% agree with that. I think if you're investing in building connectivity, it's kind of got to go a little bit hand in hand with the technology that's available, but it would not seem like a great move right now to build anything short of that 100 by 20, except for specific situations. The aerostat idea for IoT type connectivity is one thing, and you can have infrastructure that maybe supports both. But I think for broadband, for user connectivity, that 100 by 20 sounds like a really good baseline of new construction.
Thank you. Anybody else? Richard?
Sure, I'll pipe in on this. So I've been really concerned with the national discussion being about what we should have in 5 or 10 years. Since we don't have what we should have today, and it's been 15 or 20 years of problematic development where things were not developed out, and a lot of public funds were put out there for those networks, billions of dollars that were put out for those networks that never got built, and many of them got built in urban areas and not in rural areas. So money that was meant to go to rural and unserved areas ended up in New York City or Los Angeles. They didn't end up in the areas where it costs money to do development. So the first objective that I have is get workable, usable networks out to everybody, such that we don't have this roadblock of I'm not going to earn enough money in that area, so I'm not going to go into that area. And that's traditionally what happens is you have a break-off where a cost-benefit analysis is done, and they look at it and they say, 16 houses per mile, I'm not going to be able to serve that. So we're focusing more on what should the numbers be rather than are we actually going to get these services actually deployed in a reasonable period of time out to the people who need them. I don't disagree that there should be some standard to base it on, and in some areas 25.3 makes sense. In other areas a faster speed makes sense. If you look at the national averages of what people use today, they don't use a whole lot more than 25.3. Now in the future, will there be more demand on upload? I think there will be, and I think most networks are building towards a higher standard, capable of upgrade or capable of, if you look at the way radios are made these days, most of them are software defined, which means that more resources can be allocated through the radio based upon growth over a short period of time, relatively short on the replacement of equipment. You can go in and put in equipment that has higher capacity and put in higher feeds. But first and most critical is not talk about speeds and feeds, but talk about getting something actually done. Those 30 million people need service today. They don't need it 6 weeks from now or 6 years from now. And do they need a Ferrari to begin with on a country road? Everyone will argue they should always have the best. But the question is if they don't even have a Volkswagen, where are you going to get a Ferrari? So let's get the networks out there to begin with.
I would just add also to kind of agree with both of the good and bad Chris on the call.
Is that working?
That's right. That no one ever wants less capacity. So, trying to, build networks to meet current needs is a shortcoming, of our assumption. While that may be correct that there is not everyone uses more than 25.3, capacity will always come up, or demand will always come up to meet the demand for the capacity. In other words, if more bandwidth is offered at an affordable price, people will find more uses for that bandwidth. They'll be able, it spurs innovation in our ICT sector. It allows people to really think about how we can use the network to benefit more of our companies, more of our residents, hospitals, all of those distance services that benefit particularly rural people who might not live close to a city center where services are nearby. So I think that by planning to increase that capability and capacity of our networks allows us to think and dream a little bit more about how we can make use of that in the future.
Yeah, and I think just to touch on what Richard said, and I may be contradicting myself slightly here, but getting something done is such a overlooked, sounds super simple. Yeah, let's just get something done. I mean, I've been building networks for longer than I care to remember, but it's not always that easy. And I will say that getting something done and getting a network built today is really important. It's 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, it's going to be way easier to upgrade even a 10 by 10 network to 100 by 100 than to build that 100 by 100 network from scratch. Now, with wireless incremental upgrades, sometimes that can be the death by 1,000 cuts. But I will say, once you're able to establish a physical presence, once you're able to get that physical network in place, those upgrades can come. And getting from 0 to 1, having something built, is sometimes way, way harder than getting from 1 to 100.
Yeah, I'd like to add to what Frost said and just add one quick note. One of the hardest things for network developers to do is to gain access to do what they do. And so sometimes we ignore the fact that having a route and a way to put access points, to put network equipment in is some of the foundational part of getting a network in place. It's not as easy as it sounds in rural areas, especially in areas where there's a lot of mountains and rural roads. Certainly Frost knows this, he covers areas that are in that. And I want to commend the ISPs that work in those areas. And I want to say to Samantha that I agree with you 100%. It's just, you got to get some competition in there as well.
Thank you. I think that's a great way to start. And I think one of the critical elements that has been raised in here is how do you develop partnerships? Because if there was a way to crack this, is potentially local partnership. And I know many of you have been looking at that, because to give you one simple example, we had a problem with education. The schools were closed. And I did a project that connecting the homes for free using CBRS network. It was amazing. 20% of the parents were afraid to use it because they were going to say, does the school wants to spy on me? I'm telling you, it's like you are trying to say, but until you went through their community and engage them, barrier didn't go. And I'm sure if we can engage with the local organization, companies, the workforce, that may change much more faster than trying to come up with the whole USA magical gigabyte speed for everyone. Anybody has perspective regarding how do we leverage that?
So what you're describing, Mo, and you and I've talked about this before, is Cruise.io a year and a half ago now, just under a year and a half, when some crazy thing happened. We started talking to our county office of education, thousands of kids at home with no internet connections. A lot of them families that had never had an internet connection. And they're all low-income agricultural farm worker families. So, these are families that, even if there was an internet connection available, would have trouble carving an extra $100 a month out of their budget for it. So we started looking around and thought, okay, we can do some of this just, by being nice guys, but at some point, the bill's got to be paid, and you can't deliver service for free or next to nothing indefinitely. So we started forming those partnerships. And what we found is kind of a four-part partnership with our Equal Access initiative was we have a competent operator, although I'm part of it, so you could argue competent. But we got a competent operator in Crusoe that's running the network. We have a community partner, and that's our core focus was the County Office of Education. So we've partnered with school districts, and the community partner brings users. So they're qualifying the users to get access to this low-cost internet. We have a fiscal partner, that's our local community foundation. Again, local solutions for local problems here. And they operate as our nonprofit fiscal sponsor. And then the fourth part of it was the school district again, actually, and they give us access to vertical assets, rooftops. And that was huge. Richard touched on this. One of the hardest things to do as an infrastructure developer is, especially in wireless, is just getting permission to put gear on roof. The technology is easy. The technology comes off the shelf, you plug it into power and you turn it on. Like, my wireless engineer is gonna rake me over the coals for that. It's not quite that easy, but it's solvable. We know how to do that. The thing that's hard, Mo, you talked about it, you got to educate people. You got to be talking to humans. And once you start talking to humans, things start getting complicated. And, it took us a few months to go through with the school district. We're talking about delivering free internet service to entire communities, and it still takes time and is expensive to get it done. So, simple answers aren't always simple, but those local partnerships and our success came from the fact that we're out there, we're talking to people in our community constantly. They know us, they know who we are. We're not some random startup that's from 3 counties over that wants to come in and get on the roof of the school. We've been talking to these guys for years in some cases, and we're established and known. And that was a huge leg up. And so with the Equal Access Initiative, we've been trying to see if we can kind of short circuit that and build some instant credibility for other people operating on the same model.
I'd like to jump in on that one. Oh, is that
go ahead, Samantha. Ladies first.
I was just going to say that absolutely, local communications and partnerships is really key. There are the local CDCs, there are digital inclusion practitioner organizations, training organizations, the libraries, the schools, et cetera. And that is how you win over people and with buy-in and, that you're not an outsider and that these are trusted sources. So I can't agree with that more. But also there is something to be said for working with local and state officials to revise the red tape that's required to create these kind of small gap networks throughout our country, because it's very difficult. And there's often, when there are several initiatives that I know of that, the installation should be a couple of days, but it is stretched to 6 months because of paperwork and checkoffs and all these things that, of course, we need to make sure that we're doing things safely, effectively, and all of that. But it feels like it's prohibitory, to getting actual progress done. So I think there's a role here to be played where we should be looking at how we can streamline those processes so that we can move progress forward. But also, as a background on the federal side, we have other means where municipal networks are trying to, fill in gaps in underserved places where the business model for local, for ISPs just doesn't work because of low income and whatnot, and additional subsidies are needed. And we have things like the Connect Act that is being proposed to actually prohibit municipal networks. And so that feels like it's a step in the wrong direction as well. So we have, I think, a lot of challenges that we need to meet as a field to think about how we can get out of our own way and enable progress.
Okay, thank you.
I would build on a little bit of what Samantha said as well. and I absolutely agree regarding the local partnerships. I think those are key. One of the things that I would say, with the way Mo, you framed the question, I think whether you did or not, some people I think have this sense of what's wrong with these people? There's this great free service. Why aren't they taking it up? And I think if you think back to the last time you got a piece of mail saying, hey, I got this great free deal for you. What'd you do with it? You did the same thing I did. You recycled it. Like, you didn't take it seriously. And so this isn't a matter of people being too dumb, I think, which is not what Mo was saying. But sometimes we can get in this sense of like, what does it take? Well, it takes trust. And that's why the people that Samantha listed off are so important. The food shelf, the school district, the libraries, the touch points that people already trust. Those have to be essential in making the connection between a low discounted or a lower free price service.
Thank you. Any other one? I see that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Mo, just a quick thing that I wanted to say, because Samantha brought up why would a bill go through that prohibits the municipal deployments? It isn't so much that that a bill would seek to prohibit a municipal deployment. It's that they're looking for a solution that either pushes one way or another. And I think truly what we see from when I look at the 1,000 WISPs that we represent in small communities and throughout the United States, is that they function best when they have fair and equal competition, when they're all given the same access. If AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile or one of them comes in, they're not just automatically squashed out of the picture because they're a small player. And the issue with having municipal or county or city-based operators is that sometimes the public money squashes the private efforts. And so I don't mind them being there. They should be there, and they should certainly be part of the program. But there needs to be fair cooperation and fair competition so that you get the most people wanting to be in there. The middle mile, the ability to go through and put the backhaul in that's necessary, to go on poles, to go underground, all of the things that happen when you go through cities and counties, a lot of them push towards making very expensive access or no access. And if you can't get that access in there, you can't afford to put in any kind of network. So the backbones, perhaps through municipalities, certainly, I have no issue with the municipality participating in that. As far as being providers, they can. Traditionally, they've not been very good providers. Look at the history of municipal providers. But I don't think they should be excluded. I just think there needs to be a fair and equal ground for it.
Actually, you brought that. I was going to go to that next question. One of the critical elements of partnership is the whole issue of middle mile. Because as you know, if we can find a way, and this is the backbone that needs to get close to the community, and that's where the partnership can significantly support that. In that case, what is the perspective? Because as you said, in order to solve this problem, we need to cut it to different pieces. There is a connectivity part, there is a coding backbone, there is overall, that's how we can reduce it. What is the perspective regarding this middle mile partnership? Is there anything can be done in there to set the stage that can change with the right of ways and things like this that can be leveraged? Because that can significantly help the cost. 30% is middle mile, as you know, the cost of broadband, at least.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things there, Mo, is that middle mile is only useful if someone's going to connect last mile to it.
Yep.
Middle mile is critical to get last mile going, but without last mile, it is worth not even the dollar spent to put it in the ground. And unfortunately, that's got to be coordinated in partnership. If you go out and you put $100 million middle mile network in the ground, you might not connect any customers if you don't have service providers ready to hang off that middle mile. And like the members of WISPA, the members of FISPA, they're exactly the kind of ISPs that can take great advantage of that middle mile opportunity, because that middle mile opportunity might be too much for a small independent provider to jump on and get done. But if there's some kind of, and the state of California is looking at this right now, if there's some kind of umbrella middle mile organization, and there's a few of them out there, some dark fiber providers, Crown Castle does a little bit of dark fiber that we use, you can leverage that as an independent provider and really make a difference in a community. It's just got to be built somewhat intelligently. If you go indiscriminately through a middle mile in the ground, or hanging on poles, it's not going to have the desired end result. And a big part of it is just education and communication. Middle mile doesn't serve any customers. Middle mile makes it possible to serve customers. And that's something that is missed a lot of times, especially at the local political level, where people will talk about, oh, this middle mile project is going to cost, you know, X million dollars. Great, let's get that done. And then everyone in this county is going to have service, right? And there's a big missing jump there that is solvable, but it is a challenge, and it's just got to be looked at holistically, because one doesn't work for the other.
I think one thing that first you said is very true. If you look at the majority of communities, like cities or municipalities, they're trying to solve local problems. And the only reason they get engaged in some initiative, they're trying to enable it. So I think that if we can put the right proposal of how do we work with them to really enable local problem, I think there's no objection. They just, when you talk to them about dollars and cents, like it's very hard for a municipality. And I was telling my colleague and I, David Tesky, are very much engaged in this NIST initiative. And when you sit down and talk to a city and talk to a technology, now you understand Chinese English is like, ooh, it's like completely different. And that's where a lot of people miss the boat. They're not trying to block, but they need rule to follow. And we're talking a different language sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know if other people in the panel have a perspective on that.
Yeah, I want to throw out that we've looked carefully at middle mile, and I think, like Frost said, it has to be a part of the solution. It has to be done carefully, though. We've looked at many of the attempts to do middle mile. It's resulted in, there's no value neutral way of describing cherry picking, which isn't to say that the companies are bad companies. It's to say that the company saw a business opportunity to serve some customers with that network and did not see a business opportunity that would work to serve others, given the range of subsidies and such things available. And so if you do that without having a sense of how you're going to solve the costliest problems, you can actually make your problem worse. And this is the greatest concern that I have regarding Starlink, for instance, from SpaceX, which is that, sorry, I think Rami needs to be muted.
Yeah.
So I think Starlink is terrific in the sense that, like, people who are very far away from any existing source should be able to get this access. And I think it's wonderful, the engineering, there's a lot of really great aspects of it. But the simple fact is that if you have an ISP or a community that wants to connect everyone, and you've just lost 10 to 20% of the addressable market, the business case to connect everyone is more difficult. And that's not to say that Starlink is bad because of that reality, but this is a reality of middle mile connections as well, in that if you enabled a few businesses to pick off the more profitable customers, you may make it harder to serve everyone. And that has to be something that we're all looking at from a public policy point of view.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, and I think that
go ahead,
to follow on what Chris just said, I think it's really critical that there be diversity in the networks for that very reason. There are less expensive ways to serve certain areas. There are more expensive ways, and there's the middle ground. And you want the competition in there so that if you look across the United States and you start looking at the statistics about who's served and who's underserved and who's not served, it gives up the perspective that all of those people are not paying the same price for the same service. They're paying drastically different prices for those services. And in many areas where there's low incomes, the cost that's being offered up for those services is just too high for the customers to be able to pay. And the reason for that, I just spoke to somebody in Alaska last week, and they were told that they could get 25 megabit per second service. Actually, it was lower than that when it got to their door, for $697 a month. Wouldn't that be nice? And the fact of the matter is most people in the community can't afford $697 per month. So first thing is you got to get the service to them, and it's got to be in a mechanism that's affordable. And that may not be with all the bells and whistles up front. And with a centralized or an agreed to partnership for middle mile, you can bring down some of those costs because you tie into that. And as Frost said, you're able to address the customers on the last mile because you have a good infrastructure in place. It's a combination of things that have to move forward. There has to be better communication with the municipalities and the counties. There has to be an understanding of what those use cases are that they're going to get in their community. As Chris said, there has to be the ability to bring in competition such that you don't knock out groups or constituents as a result of that. And then you get good competition. That's through diversity of providers.
Thanks,
I'd like to
Samantha.
add a little bit to that as well. Actually, I agree with that, Richard. But I think there's also a higher order conversation that needs to be had. And that is, what is the business model, right? Can we expect the business model of internet suppliers to hold up in areas where the customer base is either very poor and can't afford premium services, or very population sparse, in the sense people are far away? So the business models for traditional ISPs kind of fall apart in those places. So
Samantha, just I add one comment because it's going to help on your guide. In Silicon Valley alone today, 15% don't have broadband.
Right.
We cannot get connectivity affordability in Silicon Valley.
Absolutely. And it's because of these areas. And so we need to talk about how are subsidies made. Can the FCC and NTIA, or the federal government, create incentives to build and expand networks in places through potentially, and this is, I'm going to borrow something from one of our Marconi fellows, Marty Cooper, who you might know as the inventor of the cell phone. He always has been championing this idea about, can we incentivize them by offering free spectrum access and free site rental to operators that would commit to a specific coverage at affordable prices? Can we use some of the mechanisms that we have within the federal government in the way we license spectrum to actually incentivize building in areas where a traditional business model fails?
Thank you. I think I got a text, somebody telling me that is more than 15%. I'm just trying to be generous to our carrier partners, okay? I think actually one of the, yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I would like to, can I throw something out there if you don't mind? Which in particular, Chris, is someone who's worked in both urban and rural environments, may be able to be an arbiter. I take a little bit of issue with something Richard said twice now, not because I don't wish it was true, but because I don't know that it is true. And that's, I would say that I think wireless is going to be used in the future much more often to create competition in more urban and dense areas than in low density areas. I think this is like, anyone who follows this space closely is familiar with sort of like the odd switcheroos that we have. Like we did voice on wires, and then we did TV on wireless, and then we're in the middle of switching that, right? Like, and it seems to me that like wireless has been really important in rural areas, but increasingly we're seeing fiber optic out there. And where we see fiber optic hit these rural areas, I'm not sure it's a great business model for a wireless operator to come in and to compete with them. But I think that these overlapping networks, which is exactly what I want to see that Richard's describing, I think we're going to see more of those in suburban and urban areas. And that's where we're going to see a heck of a lot more wireless investment in the future. And I mean, I could very well be very wrong about that, but I thought it'd be worth us talking about briefly.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting thing to look at. Where, my direct experience is, as boots on the ground, is we're building wireless over top of AT&T fiber and Comcast DOCSIS 3, and also out in rural areas where there's nothing. And we do a little bit of everything. And for us, just as far as the competition aspect, I kind of try and ignore it. Honestly, we just focus on doing the best job we can for our customers. We focus on, to use a sporting analogy, we play our game, we don't play their game. But we just try to come in and, treat the customers right and deliver. When we talked about speeds, we can talk about speeds and numbers and speed tests all day long. The end users at home, there's definitely speed test warriors out there that are testing their home internet connection every night. But the vast majority of them don't care what the speed test says. All they care about is, do I get a spinning wheel or not? And if I don't get a spinning wheel, it's good enough, right? And so we try to focus on good enough. And a large part of that is build out more than is needed and try and keep up with it. We set our threshold warnings on backhaul links at 60%. We try to be really conservative of the builds. I put in 4 conduit, we're only 1 right now, that kind of thing. But a big part of it just comes down to serving the needs of the community. And if it's rural right now, we're doing a lot of wireless. We have fiber in our downtown core, but we also have a lot of wireless overlapping other parts of fiber in town. And I think more and more, as these technologies evolve, we've kind of got this like leapfrog race thing where wireless is cheaper to deploy and faster to get to customer, and has the ability to reach customers that fiber can't. But fiber is a 50-year asset once you build it. And so there's trade-offs there.
Thank you. I think one of the things I wanted to maybe turn the attention and see if we can challenge ourselves is we are in the middle of Silicon Valley. There's a lot of interest by internet companies from Google, Facebook, and others trying to come up with ideas to get the connectivity, but nothing seems to have worked very well. What could we in the Silicon Valley do to really help in this area of connectivity? Is there anything that we can do from people in the call?
I have an answer for you. Communicate better. I had a really interesting experience a couple of months ago when this actually probably last year, because it was after one of the riots in San Jose. My son is very interested in civil rights, and he wanted to see where was all of this activity going on in San Jose. So we went down immediately after one of the riots at downtown San Jose, right near the mayor's office. And we drove down, and there was a bunch of people at a school across the street from City Hall, and it's a very fancy City Hall if you've never seen San Jose City Hall, very high tech. But there were a bunch of people scrubbing walls. So I parked the car, and we came out, and we crossed the street, and we realized that some of the demonstrators had graffitied this school, and they'd made all kinds of horrible words all over the side of the building, and there were people sitting there with scrub brushes. The guy sitting next to me, I picked up a scrub brush, I handed one to my son, we started scrubbing the walls, was the mayor of San Jose. And the mayor of San Jose was sitting there scrubbing the walls. And of course, anytime I have the opportunity to advance wireless or to advance, the ISP industry, especially in a city like San Jose, especially when I'm sitting right next to the mayor of San Jose, we started talking policy on ISPs. And he started to grumble at me about how he's attacked by this group and he's attacked by that group, and they never quite come in to really serve San Jose. Their interest is over here and over there and for this thing and that thing, which just brings me to the topic I said a moment ago, which is if we want to advance the expansion of broadband, which I think mayors and city councils throughout the United States want, we need to speak their language, and they need to speak a little more of ours, which means we need to educate them about what all these things mean. If you I turned on the television last night, and there was Comcast advertising how they offer 2 gig speed over AT&T's 1 gig speed with equipment that won't go over 100 megabits per second. It's that funny of a juxtaposition. And then I have cities that are really more interested in the fees they can get for pole rights than they are in actually getting the service in. Communication is key, and we lack it so much that 17 years of subsidies in CAF, in RDOF, in USF, in RUS, in state and federal emergency funds, in local funds, just don't ever happen right because that communication is that low. And as representing some ISPs that are 5 guys big, they're there to serve a local constituency, and they need the cooperation of the cities and counties. We need to be an instrument of communications with them so they understand how we will benefit their constituencies. I don't think we do a good job of that.
Thanks. First.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of tack onto that a little bit. I think that you touched on a couple of things, Richard, that really struck home for me. One is, communication. We got a large part of my job is meetings and email, right? I don't get to bolt things together nearly as much as I'd like, but the meetings and email are critical in being able to bolt things together later. So we do them. But that communication, I think you're right, can get better. And I think all of us on both sides, from the private and public partnership side, can work on that. The other thing I wanted to touch on was you talked about funding programs and the actual tangible results of those funding programs. And one of the frustrations that I have, and I've had for years, is that funding programs, like most WISPs, and Cruise IO at its core is a WISP, we operate on really thin margins across the board. Richard, membership of WISPA, I talk to people out there when I go to the WISPA shows every year, and it's just, these guys are operating on ridiculously thin margins, nothing like the margins that the incumbents are able to recognize just because of market share. But what that means is that for a lot of them, the operating burden of funding programs just means they're not interested. Because it's actually, in a lot of cases, cheaper for them just to do it without getting any kind of state, federal, or in some cases even local funding. It's cheaper for them just to go do the same infrastructure rather than take the funding to get it done, because the extra money they're going to have to spend to manage the funding. And so I think there's some challenges there. But one of the biggest things for me is, we talked about it earlier, just getting something done. Right? I've been looking at funding programs for years, and we looked at the RDOF funding program in specific, and I was just like, there's no way we can build anything out of this funding program. It's too broken up. It's lobbied to high heaven. It's not going to work for us. It's working in some areas, but in our area, it wasn't going to build in. But we know there's things that need to be built, and this is where that local operator idea comes in. Having someone that knows the area, having someone that's boots on the ground, whether it's an independent ISP or a really well-educated and armed municipality that can actually identify projects that need to get done, rather than, and this is the thing that makes me sadder than anything else, seeing projects that are built purely to extract money from grants or funding processes. The number of times that I've talked to people and I've said, what is it you're trying to do? And say, well, maybe this, but there's this grant available. We want to get the grant. Like, what do you want to do with the grant? Oh, we want to build internet. If you don't have a project, don't go after the grant. Let someone that needs the money to actually make a difference in a community use the grant. But there's too many people now just looking for a way to, pull grant money in. If you've got a project that's ready to go, get the grant money. But there's, I get really frustrated seeing the kind of administrative bureaucracy eat the money.
I'd like to add to that is that just that we should be aware and just acknowledge that there are people out there, organizations, businesses, companies that are not personally incentivized to support the right kind of decision making using, transparent, peer-reviewed data sources, right? There is a long-standing history that ISPs prefer that, data sources like the 477 that obscure the type of data that we should be using to make intelligent decisions about how to direct our funding. So until we as a country and as a field come together and agree to have a system that is based on identifying eligibility and funding based on peer-reviewed, transparent data that can be looked and assessed and validated over time by our communities at the local level, as well as all the way up, we're never going to make a move forward on making better intelligent decisions around that. So we need to acknowledge that there are people that are going to work and resist progress in that direction because it's not in their best interests.
Yeah, I would double down on that, just in the sense that we saw, for instance, in Santa Cruz County, Frost, I don't know if you were as aware of this, but I was speaking with the county administrators, and they had approached AT&T and basically been like, you talk about how there's a lot of barriers. Will you build out in this area if we change the law in the way that you want? And AT&T said, oh yeah, definitely. Here, you got to change this, you got to change that. Santa Cruz County did. AT&T went and cherry picked. And there's no way to get AT&T to serve a community well. There's no way to get Lumen or Frontier to do a good job. Like, these companies don't exist to do a good job. They exist to extract wealth on behalf of Wall Street. And I don't say that as someone who hates capitalism. I say that as someone who loves markets. Like, and you have to recognize who's pro-market and who's anti-market. And one of the things that I find is that local leaders often want to be pro-market. They want more choices in their community, but they have no idea how the right of way works. There's no one, when Richard says that, like, that they're trying to like maximize the pole rentals and the right of way permitting fees and stuff like that, in part it's because there's no one steering that ship. You know, most local governments that are certainly below like 50,000 people, serving a community less than 50,000 people, they don't really have an idea. They're looking to others for guidelines and how to implement these policies and what they mean and that sort of thing. And so there is a real need to educate folks, and we need our elected officials to understand that they should need to listen to the folks that have the common interests in mind, not the big companies that are headquartered in, you know, 5 states away.
Yeah,
I was just
I
going to
couldn't
add.
agree more with
Sorry,
that.
sorry.
Mo, just 1
Go
second.
ahead.
I want to, you know, the problem with Zoom is that you don't have the physical audience where everybody can clap all at once. I wanted to do that with Samantha because what she said was so critical to this. So I represent a league of very small and medium-sized businesses that go out there to try and compete with the large providers. And mapping, the accuracy of the mapping is so pathetic. The way in which the form 477, for those of you who don't know, that's the FCC form that all ISP providers have to fill out in order to show where they cover an area. They're so inaccurate. They are so unrepresentative of what's really being done. Mo's slide early on showed you some of the comparisons of how bad that data is. If you represent one person in that area, it looks like you cover the whole area. There needs to be transparency, not only in the mapping and the data format and the appropriate way of looking at that data, but also in looking at the ways in which you can service those areas. It shouldn't be a great secret to me whose equipment is on the corner over there. It is. When I did the CBRS standards, we were forbidden from allowing people to know who was where, because it's considered an uncompetitive secret. None of my ISPs complain when we tell them, go out there and advertise that tower over there and that piece of equipment over there is yours. You know, because you put an investment in, there's no reason not to do that. But it happens the other way, that we try and keep these things so untransparent that it actually affects the flow of funds, it affects the accountability, and it affects competition. So I wanted to do the universal clap there because that is a major, major problem.
I think Samantha got it right there. So I think, thank you, excellent discussion. I would actually point me back to one of the topics that we wanted to bring it today. As you know, Washington is printing money left and right. There is a lot of these funds are coming for infrastructure. And I was wondering, do you believe we can maybe potentially change the game, or this become the same $20 billion that has been spent, and then end of the day, nothing can show for the ground? Because one of the critical elements is the policy and the map, and all of these are happening at the same time. Is there something can be done if we want to help the community cities to take advantage of this funding to make the local improvement, or no, we should just do something else? What is the panel's perspective regarding what's happening in Washington? How can we leverage these trillions that are flowing around?
Well, I think step one is don't do what we've always done, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? We've tried it. So let's have a look at some other options. If we, and I think you touched on it right at the start, Mo, we got to decide what we're trying to get done. What is the goal? Is the goal spend this money on middle mile so that we can have a brand new ecosystem of independent ISPs springing up to build last mile? That could work. I know plenty of industrious people that are ready to try and learn this equipment and hang off it. I know there's an incredibly generous industry represented very well by WISPA and FISPA. This is the most generous industry with knowledge that I've ever seen. The number of times that I'll see a WISPA-palooza or at the FISPA show, someone sit down at a table and basically just like brain dump their entire business operation methods to some guy that just walked in off the street because he said, I'm thinking about doing this. Like, that doesn't happen anywhere else. So this is an industry where you can start up, you know, it's an incredibly open industry for people to start up. So if we did something that could enable that, not only would you start getting that broadband growth, but you'd get a huge economic boost out of new businesses and new organizations being launched.
Thank you.
I believe that there may be actually some danger in doing what we're doing right now. The numbers in early CAF were in the millions of dollars. Before that, in the rural funds, it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then it went into the summy millions of dollars. Then it went into the middle millions of dollars. Then we got to the infrastructure bill where we were talking about $50 million. Now we're at $60 billion. Now the origination of this is $100 billion. So let's see how much money we can throw on the wall and see if it sticks. And exactly what Frost said before was that we don't want to do the same thing over and over, but we're doing the same thing over and over. All of those bills were done without even having an expert in wireless in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem I have with this is it is an execution issue. It is understanding the problem issue. It is not simply dollars and cents. The other last thing, I'll let other speakers speak, but there's OpEx and there's CapEx. And if you only focus on CapEx, then what happens with OpEx? Those companies go away after they get their money and they go and put their systems in. So we got to look at the whole picture, not part of it.
Mm-hmm. I'd also
Samantha,
like to go back to the data component of this. And there is a lot of broadband mapping initiatives going on right now. Next Century Cities, if anyone knows them, they published a really great report, kind of inventorying a lot of statewide issues, because there's a lot of interest in leveraging the value that has been given based on the 2019 Broadband Data Act that opens the door to potentially considering other sources for eligibility than just the 477 form. So there's been a rush to do mapping efforts. The problem is there's no standardization across these efforts. So you have a lot of different types of methodologies and technologies being employed to obtain this kind of data. Some of that is through working with ISPs, and so somehow the ISPs are providing just better data than they do to the 477. Some people are using proprietary data sets like Ookla where there is a paywall, so there's a lack of transparency. And then of course there's open source technologies like MLab that's a little bit more open source and transparent. But because of that spread, we're not always looking at apples to apples data here. And so to go back to Richard's point about how we really need to be educating people, we also need to educate ourselves on what network data looks like, how it's collected, and what kind of information we can expect to glean from it. Because we have efforts like the NTIA's NBAM tool that's overlapping a ton of data sets that are not equivalent. And so it projects an image that they should be equivalent, but they are not. In many cases, these data sets are measuring different things. And so, looking at gaps in overlapping data sources that are not equivalent is very misleading. And so I think by aggregating and having all this chaos of data collection and efforts going on without a centralized conversation happening is dangerous as well, because we're actually diluting our ability to have an intelligible conversation about how to use data to direct funds and instruct investments. So I'm going to just make a quick plug. The Marconi Society is convening a broadband mapping coalition. If you are interested in joining the conversation in this topic, we want to kind of, bring people together to discuss this and try to help build a set of resources that would be useful to help with this conversation. So please let me know if you're.
And I wanted to, with regard to the infrastructure broadband project or the infrastructure and where we see that going.
Mhm.
I've always felt that people were overestimating the likelihood that we were going to see some kind of big bill with a 50-50 Senate and a lot of mixed incentives from different folks. But I'll say this, that I feel like there's some really good progress in how they're looking at distributing this $40 billion that would be used for rural infrastructure, in that they will be it'll be up to the states. States may be choosing to have the FCC conduct a reverse auction on their behalf if they do not have the capacity to distribute the money that the state is awarded. But states will have the power to decide how to distribute this money. And I think, you know, there will be some states in which I think they're doing a good job, some states in which I think they're doing a bad job. Richard will have the same thing, and we'll agree in some of those states, and we'll disagree in some of those states. But fundamentally, this is far superior to an approach in which the FCC does it, because the FCC has just demonstrated time and time again that it is way too beholden to the big carriers, and small ISPs like Frost's, like Cruisio, that maybe even were more ambitious and thought they could get something out of RDOF. They got burned, and they're not going to do it again. And so even if the FCC learned a lot of lessons and would do it better, the simple fact is a heck of a lot of small ISPs have learned a lesson that they just shouldn't get involved at the FCC because it's not their game. And so I feel like distributing money through the states and directly to communities even would be preferable in my point of view. But I'm willing to go with the states, and we'll have to fight about it there. But that is a good improvement.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think one of the questions that came up from the people participating is regarding avionics, some of the work. Do we believe any of this work about, which we talked a little bit earlier regarding from Alphabet, doing which they closed it down. But anyway, from SoftBank, there's a lot of internet company or all these LEOs that are coming in board. There's a lot of big investment. How can we leverage all this investment of satellite technology or this to make a dent in this? Or what is your perspective regarding the satellite and balloons or other technologies that you see and hear?
With this in mind, just keep the thoughts. It's me again, Peter Wolter, president from WCA, and I think it's now time for the raffle. So we are
raffle. Oh, that's more important. Sorry, guys.
Right. So we are raffling on off, and people are still here. We have 50 people. This rocket lamp will be shipped directly to you. And the lucky winner is drawn by somebody in the background, not by me, David Bosky. David Bosky, if you are here, open your audio, video, show yourself.
This is a really cool prize. While we're waiting for that, I want to say this is awesome.
Hi there.
Yeah. So next time, Christoph, you have to be in the audience and not on the panel. Yeah.
Okay, Dave.
Hey, David, Dave, congratulations for this win. We've sent it directly to you. Please send me an email at peter@wca.org. My address will come.
Your pen.
Yeah. We'll ship it to you. It will take probably a week or 10 days. I'm not sure how long it will take. If you receive it, just switch it on and send a picture to us so we can put this here also on our website.
All right. Now, so the email is peter@wca.org?
Yes, right. Yeah. You will see it also here. Or peter.walter, everything works. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And I think we have also your email address from Zoom in emergency case if you can send it to you. With this in mind, I stop sharing and go back to the thought about the satellite coverage. Congratulations again, David. And
thank you.
Mo, is back to you. And I think Frost had an answer, the first answer to this topic. We will let this event run until we show and we see some more, some interest also from the audience.
We're going to wrap up in 5 minutes.
So we will not cut it off so soon, huh? Yeah. Okay. More back to you.
So I think I saw some text, so maybe we can start. People have a perspective about the LEOs and also some of the other techniques that are coming airborne. Can they be helping us in this fashion? How they can be useful?
Yeah, I think Christopher had a really good take on it. 5-10 years, LEO option is consolidating, and they're just they're just another incumbent. I think once you get to that size, even if you start out with great, you know, industry disrupting, and I hate the word disrupting so much, you know, once you get to a certain size, you're just an incumbent. Doesn't matter what kind of ideas you came in with, you're going to be the incumbent to the next guy that comes up. And I think that the LEO satellite systems, that's where they're at. They're already at a scale where they're basically in that spot in the market. I think they're going to be a great tool in the toolbox for people. I would love to see them work with rural WISPs. I've already heard people in municipalities talking about having had conversations with Starlink, and Starlink saying, well, we're not going to serve absolutely everyone in these communities. We'll serve some. And so I'd love to see them working to be maybe a backhaul for a small hub of a community or something. I just don't know if that's going to be in their model. But I think that's, you know, from an ISP's perspective, they're going to do what they're going to do. And same kind of attitude that I have towards AT&T and Comcast, I got to be aware of it, but I can't, it's not really going to change the way that I try and operate our business. I think some of the other technologies, the aerial based stuff, Project Loon obviously was really interesting. It went down. Clearly, there was a decision made that it's not going to work at the kind of massive scale that Alphabet's looking for. That's not a bad thing. It means that there's some great technology that falls out of it. Alphabet's X are doing some really cool things with free space optics right now, and they look really promising. And it's, you know, I love the concept of tools in the toolbox, and I think that they're going to be part of that. And I think that early, Mo had talked about the difference between broadband and connectivity. And I think that a lot of these aerial solutions right now look to me like they're going to serve the connectivity aspect. They're not necessarily going to replace broadband connectivity. That doesn't mean that in 3 to 5 years there's not going to be some shift in technology and capabilities that's going to make them a great great alternative, not replacement. But you know, if it was a case of replacing one thing with another, there would be fiber everywhere. And we all know that's not the case.
Thanks. Anybody else has any other opinion on that? Yeah.
I just to double up on Frost's comment, because it's cliche, but it's true. Tools in the toolbox is what this is about. 10 years ago, if you'd said use fiber, you would have said, I have to be a very professional company. I have to be an industrial application. There's only a certain amount of uses, and 90% of the fiber was dark. And a lot of those companies that provided fiber went bankrupt because they thought nobody's ever going to use this capacity. Don't you wish you held on to that stuff today? Because fiber is an incredible tool and people use it. 4, maybe 6 years ago, WiMAX was the thing to use. If you didn't have WiMAX, you weren't using the right kind of technology. How many people are using WiMAX today? They're using LTE, which is a derivative of WiMAX, but it's not WiMAX anymore. So these things go through ebbs and flows. We have fiber, we have satellite, we have cable, we have the Luna, we have the satellites, we have all kinds of different choices. And I think they all fall into their applicable place. Hopefully they create competition and options for the people that we're serving. And that's the best thing. If just to have those technologies out there doesn't necessarily serve to wipe out or do something bad to something else. Most of our WISPs serve a hybrid environment. They use different spectrum bands, they use different modalities. Some use fiber and they connect to last mile, they do wireless. Some use cable and they connect to wireless. Some use wireless only. They all use what works. And so that hybridness is what's good.
Just to touch on that again, the only thing better than a vendor doing a new technology is 3 different vendors doing the same new technology, because it means it's going to get cheaper. 5 years ago, my rule of thumb to put up a gigabit wireless link was somewhere in the $5,000 to $7,000 range. I can put up a gigabit wireless link for under $1,000 today. That's 5 years. It's going to change. We get 10 gig links coming in now that are the same hardware cost to us that a gigabit link was 5 years ago. And I don't even know what's going to be the case in 5 years from now. So one of the things I love about this industry is that it is constantly changing. You try to grip it too hard and it'll run through your fingers. So it's fun. I think the tools in the toolbox is really the way that we try to look at it. And yeah, just don't get hung up on it too much. And have fun with it, because if you're not having fun with it, man, there's easier jobs to do than this.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the key things that we have seen and experienced as in joint venture, we have been trying to work a lot with partnerships, because that's the key thing. And it was been actually my partner and I, David Witowski, have written some papers, because end of the day, to solve that, he just did a paper recently that we brought up into perspective what I call the small cell. As you know, there's a lot of battle, and he showed how the home and residential, the value significantly improves by people who have a capability of that in the neighborhood. Now, if I'm a city, if I can benefit that, and I look at the big picture, and we can actually do things differently. One of the challenges, I think, as we discussed in our call, is lack of good data and also cohesive, because you make decisions with everything happening. Unfortunately, from what I hear from all our panel and our discussion, our world is not going to get simpler, I think. But on the other hand, the need is there. It's really interesting. The COVID showed to us that we need to get affordable broadband. We need to get citizen connected, workforce development, like that. So in that case, the next 5 to 10 years, you see, I think US is going to put major initiative in that level. So in that level, it opens more opportunity. But my personal feeling is the only way we will crack it, do it locally, and do it in a solving for a local community with partnership. That's long run sustainable. These other things are fantastic, but you're not going to make the business case to work with a population of 1 per 10 miles, correct? But on the other hand, there's a lot of investment happening, and one of the critical element is to develop local partners, internet company. How do we solve the problem? And I think the panel brought a lot of good topics. So I thought maybe for the last, I'll leave each person to see if there's any comment and perspective regarding this area of ruler, and any recommendation for the audience. Go ahead. Maybe Samantha. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we didn't touch on this, but like, I think looking at CBRS and what's being done in cities, I feel like we've proven the use it or share it model. We desperately need to make more spectrum available that is underused. I'm working in particular with a number of tribal entities working in Indian country. There's just a whole lot of areas where it just kills you that people need something. Wireless is a really, really great opportunity in many of these areas, and they just don't have access to spectrum that nobody's using in those areas. And so, like, as we're talking about things, I don't think we need to timidly move into this sort of use it or share it mentality with these databases. I hope that people are willing to push hard into this, and we're aggressive about reclaiming spectrum that is not being used efficiently, and we do make it available, and not just to the biggest companies that might be able to lobby for it, but to make sure that it's available in a commons approach that allows local entities to really take advantage of it.
Thank you.
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is just keep talking. Communication. Richard touched on it earlier. Talk to everyone. When I'm talking to other ISPs, I tell them about, first of all, the hardship that I've had working with cities, counties. When you're new and they don't know who you are from a guy off the street, you're just one more person that they've got to talk to and listen to. And it does take time to establish some credibility. And that's really what it comes down to, is that credibility. So use what credibility you're able to build. Help build up other providers around you. Help with an organization like WISPA or FISPA or the Marconi Society or the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Like, these organizations can pull together and generate somewhat instant credibility for our members. We can help make these introductions, get these conversations going, and hopefully jump over the couple of years of having to exist near a school district just for them to be willing to sit at a desk with you and talk to you. Because every single success that we've had here in getting something done, like really making a difference in getting something done, has started from a conversation. It doesn't start from sending over a fully fledged plan and having someone sign off on it. It starts from a conversation with the guy who's got the problem on his desk to solve. And if you go in a partnership, we'll talk about partnerships. If you go in a partnership angle and you can help solve a problem that someone else is trying to solve and do some good for your business at the same time, it's not a zero-sum game. Everyone can benefit from this. Someone else doesn't have to fail in order for you to win.
Thank you.
Snaps for Chris and for everybody. If I'm going to give anything, I will say last moments. I think that so many good comments were made today. It's hard to add to it, but if you have a project, if you're doing mapping, if you are looking for network intelligence, I urge you to really consider open, transparent data collection, right? Allowing others to peer review, to vet your information makes everybody's intelligence, makes us better, lets other people help us make better decisions. So, if and when you are able to make a decision, I highly recommend that. And like Chris says, keep talking. There are people out there that are, like us and like the local Self-Reliance, like the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and like many others that are looking to help sort through the minutia and the noise to get to the right answer, and to help communities make the best intelligent decisions they can. So look for your allies. There are plenty out there, and many of them are on this panel. So keep the dialogue going.
Thank you.
I'll put in my last 2 cents. First off, thanks to all of you on the panel. You all know your field well, and it's great to talk to a group of people who are intelligent about that. And I think I have to agree that the communication is the critical aspect for us for the future. It's not a zero-sum game. The cable people don't have to win out on the mobile people. The mobile people don't have to win out on the WISPs. There needs to be cooperation. There are projects enough for every single one of us, and there are new and forefront technologies that we can develop, and that's what we want to be doing. We want to constantly be moving forward and do those things which work best for the general public. Spectrum is a valuable resource. It's limited. Let's go out there and make the best of it, make it the most efficient we can in order to get out into the rural communities. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, I think I want to again thank you, WCA, for putting this together. I really appreciate Richard, Samantha, good Chris, and also for us. I hope everyone enjoyed the good discussion. We thank you, and then we look forward. I think I saw the emails of the people, but in case something is missing, please get Peter. He has all our contact 24/7, and he can get to us, and we're really happy to answer any additional question we have. Peter, back to you.
Thank you so much. 24/7, if there's not enough, you can reach me also in the night, because I never sleep. Yeah, thank you also from the name of WCA, Mo, Frost, Richard, and Christopher, and last not least, Samantha, of course. Yeah, I like your enthusiasm, Samantha, waving, and it was really nice. So like I mentioned before, this recording and the presentation for Mo and the nice shaking from Samantha will be available within 48 hours on our video channels, YouTube, and on our website. Also, you may have seen we have updated our website. We bring press releases out every other day or so, at least 3-4 per week. If you have ideas, send these press releases to us also about your company, your ideas, the wireless industry. We will post it on our channels. Very welcome. Okay, thanks also Boom, John Weiss, definitely, and Nick Brennan also to support the youngsters in these areas. Please support Boom, of course, support also WCA. Like I said, we live on sponsorship donations. In any case, if you have a question, shoot me an email, peter@wca.org. With this in mind, we're looking forward for the next event. Everything open, so Internet of not Internet of everything. It will be connected everything, which is based on IoT. And also follow up on this event, we will cover in our January event, the Spectrum 5G, where Richard spoke already in the past, one or twice. Also here we will discuss broadband for rural areas. So thank you so much again. I will close down the event right now in a few seconds. Yeah, with this, looking forward to see you again. Yeah.